Urban Squeeze. We've got to talk about festivals. Now, have you been to any festivals of late? Maybe you've headed to Blues Fest in Byron, which is always huge and really hard to get tickets to, or the Gold Coast Film Festival, which is still on, or Bleach Festival. Lots of different talent there. And still to come, we've got the Surfers Paradise Live starting today and Blues on Broadbeach to look forward to as well. They're all different festivals, which is great for the community and for visitors to the Gold Coast. I think it really encourages people to go to a place when there's a festival on. So Dr. Tony Matthews is a lecturer in urban and environmental planning at the School of Environment at Griffith Uni. Hello, Tony. I haven't spoken to you before. Matt usually does, doesn't he?
Matt usually does, but it's a pleasure to be on with somebody else. I love doing the show with Matt, but nice change up to be on with you.
And I love your accent.
Thank you.
Do everybody say that to you?
Some, not everybody.
Not everybody. So what are the main types of festivals popular in cities right now?
Oh, gosh, there's so many, I mean, probably the easiest way to look at this is if we put them into categories. So let's take a look at some of those categories. Mixed media is one, for example. So that's like the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, the Brisbane Festival, where you have a number of different types of productions. You've theatre, dance, cinema, music, etc. So mixed media. Then, of course, you've film festivals like the current Gold Coast Film Festival happening at the moment.
Yeah.
Music festivals, of course, obviously. Then we have pop culture festivals, which have got really popular over the last few years. So those are things like sci-fi festivals and comics and cosplay. And
they are huge, aren't they?
Huge.
The amount of people walking around last weekend in the supermarket with these outfits on is crazy.
I know, right? It's amazing. Their popularity is exploding in the last couple of years. I mean, probably because of the number of comic book movie adaptations, but nonetheless, a huge burgeoning industry. And then you've got high culture festivals. I use that term loosely, but those are things like opera, choral festivals, or writers' festivals. Food and drink festivals, another big growth area.
Yeah, that's my favourite. My favourite festivals. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's things showcase festivals or sampling like the Food and Wine Fair, instructive festivals, pop-up restaurants, another way to stage a festival.
Oh, really? Is that classed as a festival?
Well, I mean, a pop-up restaurant festival or a food festival.
Oh, yeah, as an event. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think increasingly people are excited by that because it's a sort of it's a one-off event. You either get there for the 2 or 3 days that the restaurant is open, or you never.
Yeah, I think in Brisbane they do that in the Valley. They have like a laneway, and there's pop-up.
They've done laneway festivals and pop-up restaurants there. They had similar on South Bank a few years ago as well. So, and these are happening in cities all over Australia and elsewhere. And then just to round it out, we've got science festivals. Science doesn't sound like the most exciting thing, but a lot of these science festivals are really exciting events.
So what do they have in them?
So they're usually about, let's say, a decade ago, scientists all over the world began to realize that communicating science was important, that doing science was important, but communicating it to non-scientists was important. So they started doing science festivals. Like Brisbane recently had a science festival, which Griffith was heavily involved in. So these are festivals that show the potential and application of science to community audiences or lay audiences, non-science audiences. So there's usually a fair bit of whiz-bang pop associated with these exploding chemicals and things flying out of jars and stuff like that.
And I guess it would get people interested, like younger people, if they're thinking of a career in science.
Oh, for sure. And that's a lot of their purpose.
Main thing,
I mean, there's a big drive towards careers in science here and elsewhere. I mean, we see that in the university at the moment as well. But actually, in fact, yesterday I read a very interesting article that said the STEM agenda, the science, technology, engineering and mathematics agenda, should actually be the STEAM agenda, because it should also include art, because if you don't have creativity, then none of it makes sense.
There you go.
And I agree completely.
Absolutely, yeah.
And just to finish my list, the festivals around occasions are the other ones as well. So things like Halloween festivals and, of course, St. Patrick's Day Festival, which is one from my part of the world, Anzac Day, parades, things like that. So festivals built around occasions.
And definitely Anzac Day seems to be getting bigger. I don't know if it's my imagination or not, but it seems to, this year, that everybody seemed to be out. It's
funny. I think this was my 7th Anzac Day, and even in that relatively short period of time, I would agree with you, and based on my own
very peaceful as well. Everyone was just sort of very quiet around the streets, but then you get together in those Burleigh and Mudgeeraba and all those places, and they're just all the communities there just for one thing. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and it's as occasions or festivals go around occasions, that's a more solemn and dignified one than, say, St. Patrick's Day, which is a little bit more...
Or Supernova,
And of course, I mean, just keeping it local, the Gold Coast is awash with festivals, no pun intended, but you mentioned a few of them, like Blues on Broadbeach, which brought in $20 million to the local economy last year, the Broadbeach Jazz Weekend, the Sci-Fi Festival, the Film Festival on right now, the Shorts in Paradise Short Film Festival, Opera on the Beach, the Swell Sculpture Festival, Festival, just to name a few
Yes.
of many.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So how do you think festivals can benefit cities?
Well, we could take a number of views on that. I mean, generally they're very beneficial, but one of the things that I like about festivals is they represent a move away from what we sometimes refer to as concrete culture. And this is the idea that traditionally cities have tended to invest in things like museums or stadiums, so, big infrastructure, expensive buildings and projects, the kind of concrete culture. But a lot of those pieces of infrastructure are empty a lot of the time. Stadiums sit empty most of the year. Museums are only busy on certain occasions throughout the year. So by moving towards festivals, what you do is you champion a cheaper, more adaptable way to bolster your city and bolster specific communities within it. They're also really, really good for urban branding, so associating your city with specific festivals. So then you're like, if you think about the most famous example of all is the Edinburgh Festival and the Fringe Festival.
Yes.
So Edinburgh and the festival are intertwined in everybody's minds. Now that's really successful urban branding. I mean, they have 70 years of marketing behind them, but nonetheless. So it's good for locals. And then you also start bringing tourists into the area, and festivals tend to beget festivals. One of the other really good things about festivals as opposed to kind of concrete culture is that they tend to be open and inclusive. Oftentimes there's no charge or a very minor charge to get into them.
So it's accessible for families if they just go for half a day, one day, rather than go to the museum or somewhere where you've got to pay to go in.
Exactly, yeah. So, and you can come and go based on your own schedule and things like that. One of the other nice things about festivals is they can be very good at activating underused or dead spaces. So, for example, old industrial spaces or parks at night time. Places like that.
It makes it a bit exciting, doesn't it? Like a ghost tour or something like that.
Yeah, and it brings people into parts of the city that they've probably never seen or never encountered before, and it makes those places accessible and open and safe as well. I mean, you may not be that enthusiastic about wandering through a park at night time generally, but if there's a festival on, you're going to go and check it out probably. And, another good thing that festivals do is they utilize existing space, so they don't really require a lot of new infrastructure. Mostly they're able to work with what's already there, and they'll refashion and repurpose.
So is it hard to get permission to have a festival? Just say somebody's listening and thinking, I'd like to do this festival. Is it hard? Is it difficult through council, or is there a bit of red tape? Is it easy? Is it...
It depends on what city we're talking about, and they're all different. There's always some red tape. Some cities are very conscious of reducing this red tape and what they've done. So, for example, if you look at three very successful festival cities, which again, Edinburgh, but also Nashville and Austin, both in the US, all three of those cities have designated offices within City Hall that are dedicated to culture and the delivery of culture via festivals and other means. And so these offices then have their own bureaucratic influence, and they can act as liaisons with local artists, and they can ease the organisation and reduce the red tape, so a festival can be conceived and activated or run again for a second or a third or a 10th time.
And it's only good for the community, isn't it? It's only going to promote, families getting together, visitors coming. So you'd think it would be an easy thing to organise.
Oh, absolutely. It should be. But, there are other cities. It can be very bureaucratic. There can be a lot of red tape. There's always, concerns and anxieties about things like public liability as well. That's, that occurs everywhere. But really, it depends on the city whether they decide to strategically support festivals or not, or the degree of such strategic support.
So how can festivals' popularity be safeguarded so that, they're always on?
Well, festivals are very popular, right, which is great, but it's not a cost-free thing. So too many festivals is actually a bad thing.
Oh, okay.
You can have too many festivals, your calendar gets too full and people get overwhelmed and lose interest. Or festivals can't, there's not enough space or place for each of them to function efficiently. You take, for example, somewhere like Melbourne, which has probably got the richest city festival culture in the country. Their festival scene is at or close to saturation point. So they have so many festivals now on the calendar that it's almost too much. And what we're hearing from festival organisers down there is that in order for some of these festivals to survive, what they really need to do is, first of all, consider who they're serving and why, and then think about the possibility of merging to avoid duplication. So if you think about, if you've got a short story festival and a poetry festival happening one after the other, perhaps it's a better idea to merge them.
Join them, yeah. And would cut costs as well, I imagine.
Yeah, it would. But, that depends on the involved parties, the artists and the organisers, and whether council supports that. And if you join two if you join two-day festivals, maybe you're going to make one 3-day festival. Is there capacity for a 3-day festival? So they're important questions. But so what you don't want is too many festivals. You want the right number of festivals.
So do you think we have the right number on the Gold Coast?
I think Gold Coast has a very nice number right now. Yeah, I think it does. Too many more would probably be too many, because the other thing is festivals they're also competing with other urban attractions, and particularly down here where you've got a huge amount of attraction around the beach and sport and,
yes.
and water-based activity and things like that. The people only have so much time, money and attention, so you don't want to over-compete with other things.
But our festivals seem to be a little bit different. Like there's just something for everybody. What Blues Fest, blues fans, well, not all blues fans, but just having Bleach, that's completely different. And then I think we've got a good mix, really.
Oh, I agree. I think that we've talked about stuff in the on the Urban Squeeze in the past. We've talked about things like music in the city and stuff like that, and Jason, who also presents the show, we're quite complimentary of the cultural program and cultural endeavours that are supported by the city council here. Of course, you've got the Gold Coast Arts Centre and all that, and you've got the kind of cultural precinct, and that's all a work in progress and a very good one. And you've got public art trails and stuff like that, which are all great. So I would say that Gold Coast is doing an excellent job, and I think that the council here is very supportive. You might argue that they're trying to play catch up on some of the other cities, but that's okay. They're doing a good job of it, and people are enjoying it. So I think the Gold Coast has an awful lot to offer as a destination for festivals, as a festival city.
So what got you interested in all this urban planning and the job that you do at Griffith?
What got me interested in it? Well, I've always been interested in cities and how they run and what keeps them going and what keeps people invested in them and how they become successful or how they fail. That was always something I was interested in.
And you were always from a city? Were you from a city? Or?
Yeah, I'm from a small city in Ireland called Cork. It's 200,000 people. It's the second city in Ireland, but Ireland's a small place, right? But it's, so it's like if you want to think of Cork in Australia in terms of a bit like Melbourne, but much smaller, but it's a very similar city. It's got a quite similar presentation and function. But I was always interested in cities, and then I was always interested in things like urban heritage and public art and stuff like that. And I used to do a lot of work with a group in an area called the Shandon Area Renewal Association. We did a lot of festival organisation and public art projects and sort of community renewal from the ground up, and all of that, plus an interest in the relationship between cities and climate change on another front, got me interested in planning as a way of understanding and accessing and being participant in all of this. That's how I got into it originally. Yes,
and why Australia? Why did you come here?
I was studying, I finished studying my planning qualifications in Ireland, and while I was doing that, I'd encountered a professor from out here who was with Griffith at the time, and he was looking at some stuff around climate change adaptation, which really resonated with me, and I really wanted to work on that. It was a very emerging topic at the time, so we stayed in contact, and I did some research in the area, and one thing led to another, and I got a scholarship from the CSIRO to come and do a PhD at Griffith, and I did that, and I've had an academic career since. I left Griffith for a while and then came back, but so I've been here ever since and thriving.
Yeah, it's fantastic because it's a good title you've got there, the Urban Planner at the School of Environment. So you have lots of students, they learn about urban planning and the environment to join the two together, is that right?
Yeah, we that's the approach that we take. We do urban and environmental planning. Other universities do urban and regional planning, for example, or urban and metropolitan planning. We're Griffith's history and foundation was always in environmental studies, so there's a heavy dose of environmental content in our planning program. And actually we were thrilled last week, just as a small plug, there was a national survey of student satisfaction with planning and architecture courses across the country, and we came out on top, the number one for student satisfaction. So we have the happiest students.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
So what sort of jobs will they go on to do?
A lot of them are going to go on to jobs in council.
Which is a great thing. We get more environmentally friendly. And
absolutely. And cities and how we plan and run them, that changes. We go through different phases and different concerns, and environmental concerns are pretty critical right now. So a lot of our students are going to go and work with council in that regard. Others will go into the private sector, either working for planning consultancies or maybe development corporations. Some of the others will go and work for government as policy advisors, for example.
So do you think it's changed a lot, the environmental impact and cities, with all these festivals being organised? Do you think that cities have changed a lot in the last 10 years?
Yes, they have. We have more people than ever living in cities now. I mean, this is I've said this on the show before, but this is a highly urbanised country. 90% of Australians, so 9 out of 10 people in this country live in a city. We're not a frontier country anymore. It's not an outback nation. We have a huge the outback is a huge area, but there's not very many
there's
people
no
living
people
there.
in there. Yeah.
Most people are in cities now, and globally that's the way it's going as well. It's heading towards 60%, I think. But last time I checked, I have to double check my figures. It's well over half the world's population, anyways, in cities. But more than that, we're developing a city, an appreciation and an understanding of cities as a place where, our best and worst features can be realized, and our best features can be celebrated. And there's a whole focus now in cities that's really come in the last 10 years, in cities as places where things can happen, and cities as exciting, vibrant places. And a lot of this festival culture has followed. I mean, festivals were around for long before that. But
yes,
if you even look at just simple stuff like look at TV advertising, car advertising and things like that. A decade or more ago, it was a car on the open road. Now an awful lot of car advertisements are people driving around tight city streets and things like that, or trying to discover some pop-up food festival or something.
So that's interesting.
There's a clear interest in cities and how we live in them and how we use them now, and that's only intensifying as more people live in them.
And making it more of a country feel, I guess, with the community. If you have things organised in certain parts, like festivals, that you bring the community together, so it seems like a small town, but you're in this big city.
Yeah, and this is something that we really strive for in planning. This is a real preoccupation of planners now, is this to try and create the urban village feel.
Yeah, and I think everyone loves that, don't they?
Yeah, and it happens quite organically actually here on the coast, and because if you think about the history of the Gold Coast was a series of coastal towns which have kind of gradually merged together, but each one retains its unique character. But a lot of other cities don't have that. And they really want that, or they really want something approximating that. You see it as well in bigger cities like London.
Yes.
Like London was, discrete boroughs which eventually kind of amalgamated into a larger metropolitan area. But you go to parts of London, they have very unique cultures like Camden or Hackney or Brixton or wherever. But a lot of cities where you didn't have that to begin with, where they were sort of, they grew a little bit more organically or in an unplanned way, there's a kind of a big effort now in global planning, and we see it here as well, to try and develop this urban village thing, to work with spaces that are walkable. So we use things like walkability indexes, and people will walk 400 kilometers in 5 minutes, or 400 meters in 5 minutes, or 800 meters in 10 minutes, and that's sort of we look at that as being a blast zone for activity.
Yes.
So we try and bring the large back to the small.
Talking urban squeeze with Dr. Tony Matthews, who's an urban planner with the School of Environment at Griffith University. We're chatting about festivals and how communities have joined together because of festivals. And we've been talking about like the strip of the Gold Coast and how there's little sections now. Like when I first arrived here in the 90s, it was just all one sort of thing. I think that the communities have certainly come together more. Like Burleigh has their own little sort of things that happen on a Sunday night. It's not a festival, but the fire throwers are there and stuff. Yeah. And then Currumbin has their thing where it's about the surfing and I think and down south even further, it's really, there's a little sort of area that, you sort of work out which one suits you.
That's and I remember that when I first came here, and my wife and I were exploring the area, and we went to Burleigh and we went to Southport and we went down to Currumbin and Coolangatta, and I remember just thinking all of these places are only separated by a few kilometres of the Gold Coast Highway, but they're all so different.
They're different, aren't they?
They really are, and they all have their unique features and their unique culture and their own unique kind of vibe and feel about them. And I was struck by that straight away. You as an outsider looking at the Gold Coast, you kind of just think it's this large strip with beach in the day and nightclubs at night, but it's so much more nuanced and subtle than that.
And so where did you end up? Which little place did you like the best?
I've always liked Burleigh. I've always been a huge fan of Burleigh. I really do like Burleigh, and I think it's still a really manageable size, and it hasn't been overdeveloped yet.
No.
And hopefully won't be.
No.
And it's got a nice beach, and it's protected by the headland, and there's good parking there.
Yeah, and good restaurants and a beautiful.
I love Burleigh.
It's a great feel, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
That's my favourite too.
Oh, good. We agree.
We agree. Yay. Well, it's been great chatting to you.
Likewise.
So hopefully festivals will continue.
I think they will.
Yeah, and we've got to get some new, different ones. I think
we do. And you know what's also a great idea?
What?
A nightmare.
A nightmare festival.
Yeah, not a nightmare festival, but a nightmare, as in we have a mayor of the Gold Coast.
Yes.
But if we had this is something that Amsterdam has done very successfully. A lot of cities are following. They've got a separate city mayor for nighttime stuff.
Oh, okay.
A lot of cities are cottoning on to this idea of the nighttime economy, and they're saying, well, there's a fair amount of activity, social and economic activity goes on during the day, but there's also a very rich
culture at night. So a mayor, especially for the nighttime events.
Maybe we should have a nighttime mayor who shepherds that.
I think you should go on see the council about that.
Or maybe run for office.
Or maybe run for office. There we go. Okay, thanks for coming in.
My
I really
pleasure.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's Dr. Tony Matthews, an urban planner with the School of Environment at Griffith University.